Good evening and welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Fundo Mabalani, standing in for Clement Manyatela this evening. It's great to have you with us on the SABC. So on the show tonight, we'll speak to ANC Treasurer General Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa. She's urged businesses to support democracy by donating to political parties. She was, of course, speaking at the ANC's Progressive Business Forum golf fundraiser. This was in Roodepoort in Cape Town. We'll discuss the innovative ways that they'll utilize to raise funds going forward and what we can anticipate from the January 8th statement. In other news, the Democratic Alliance has rejected allegations from ActionSA that their leader and Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, uses luxury blue light vehicles. We'll speak with DA National spokesperson Willie Okamp for further clarification. Then to conclude the show, we'll be joined by political analyst Asanda Mwasheng as well as Bongani Mahlangu on Dr. Ndlozi's resignation from Parliament. But first, my comment. So after months of speculation as to whether Dr. Ndlozi still has a future in the EFF or meaningful role to still play, that matter has been put to rest. He has resigned, suggesting there may be no further role to play. But on careful reading of that statement on his resignation, one can't conclusively say it's done. Because in that letter, they were referring to him as a fighter, meaning he remains a member. However, as we know with politics, nothing is ever certain. You can be a fighter today, a comrade within Umkhonto weSizwe tomorrow. Now, when we talk about the Mbuyiseni matter, who can forget the most recent statement by the EFF leader to journalists on the matter? This was, of course, in 2024 at their NPA. Let's listen in.
I'm not responsible for Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. 90% of the people who were here, who were expected to be here, are here. That's what matters. Whoever is not here was not supposed to be here from the beginning. So you are not going to reduce this organization to some individual. We are going to refuse that.
Now that specific statement for some had sealed it, that his future was sealed, there was no future in the EFF. But what has stood out for me today with the many articles reflecting on his 10 years in Parliament, many are full of praise, so it cannot be taken away that he has contributed immensely to this generation of politics. He can be counted most certainly among those who infused a vibrancy in Parliament and sharply criticizing leaders and seeking to hold them accountable. So it will be interesting, honestly, to see what becomes his next move. Could it be academia or grassroots activism? Which brings me to our question tonight. We're asking, what do you think Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi's next move would be following his resignation as a member of Parliament? Let us know your thoughts. You can send us your WhatsApp voice notes on 078-459-1897. Remember to share your name and surname and where you're sending your voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds or send us an X on @face_the_nation SABC. All right, let's quickly take a short break. After this, we speak to the ANC's Gwen Ramokgopa. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the party has seen more willingness among business people to fund it despite its electoral decline. In the May 2024 elections, the ANC dropped below 50% in the national elections for the first time in 30 years. Ramaphosa says the party is, however, expecting to raise enough money to fund ANC activities. ANC Treasurer General Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa joins us via Teams to discuss this further. Good evening, Doctor. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So on Saturday, President Ramaphosa will deliver the party's January 8th statement, a long-standing tradition since 1972. Now, many have opined on the climate under which this statement will be delivered. The ANC has lost its hegemony. The statement will also be delivered to a significantly smaller group of supporters. I know you've reflected as a party post the electoral outcome, but one takes it that on the 113th anniversary, there would be further reflection, specifically on this moment. How is the party taken in this moment?
Thank you very much. Compliments of the new year and greetings to the viewers and listeners. Indeed, the outcome of the 2024 national and provincial elections, we have defined it for the African National Congress as a strategic setback. It has had a huge impact on the African National Congress, and the moments of reflections have been ongoing, and we have also committed even more to our decision for the renewal of the ANC. Indeed, what is also of concern is that none of the other political parties really performed well. If you look at the Moonshot Pact, it actually collapsed and didn't grow at all in terms of voter support. You look at, for instance, the Red Berets, they actually declined. And yes, there was the element of MKP, new kid on the block, which we are still assessing and studying. However, the majority of South Africans did not go out and vote. And that is our main focus of reflection, that those that stand to benefit from a thriving democracy, from a leadership that is a servant leadership, are sending a message to us. And that is why our approach was to respect the outcome of elections and to invite all parties not to be narrow focused on party political interest, but to refocus on all of South Africans' dreams, aspirations, and be with them in the challenges that they face. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the GNU approach. And we really wish everyone to respect this process and to make the leaders elected to work for South Africa.
Now that you touch on the government of national unity, it's brought in a new dynamic for the ANC, because your January 8th statement was also historically a statement that articulated the ANC's governance strategy, but now you're co-governing. And some say this could lead to deviations from your core principle because you probably would want to appease the current political dynamics under the GNU. Your views on that?
Well, the ANC will not lose its identity and the fact that it is an organization with history, principles, values, and an outlook which is pro-poor, but that also wish and has always affirmed the unity of South Africans to deal with the challenges that our country faces. So what we call a national democratic revolution, transformation, which is enshrined in our constitution. And this year, as we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, the Freedom Charter is very clear that South Africa belongs to all. So the ANC, as it celebrates 113th anniversary, repositions itself as being relevant to the majority of South Africans, so that everybody can actually have a thriving life and have a shared prosperity. Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Yes, we have a statement of intent which all have signed, which is a minimum program of the GNU. And we also have affirmed the rule of law, which includes the constitutional imperatives, and that the laws that have been passed in Parliament democratically would need to be respected as the will of the people.
Doctor, I want to take you back to your statement that of the majority of citizens having not gone out to vote, and you're saying that that in itself was sending a message. Have you ascertained what that message was? Because one would think it's very important, because many political analysts have said most of them were disillusioned, but it would be important to find out what exactly had them sitting back and not deciding to be part of those that were at the polling stations, because it will also inform the kind of message that you craft and you give direct orders to your members to ensure that somehow you regain the lost ground. So do you know what was the message?
There are different aspects and underlying contributions that we have identified. And one of them was also the highly polarized environment amongst leaders in South Africa before. The levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality that are there, especially exacerbated post-COVID era, but also the after effects of the problems of the past, including the issue of state capture and all that. But what we are positive about is that South Africans acknowledge that there has been progress over the past 30 years and that we need to build thereon. That's why we appreciate that political parties have agreed to work together with the ANC to serve the interest of South Africans. So we will continue to forge ahead as the ANC to make ourselves relevant to the needs and aspirations of our people and to also take lessons from the past.
Now, on the finances side, there were reports that surfaced that the party's financial woes took up a great deal of the January 8th committee's time on Sunday because service providers were yet to be paid. Was this in fact the case, and has this matter now been resolved?
Well, the ANC, I guess like any other party and non-profit organization, thrives on fundraising. We also are privileged in South Africa that we receive IEC public funding through the IEC, and further that is a multi-party fund where corporate South Africa is encouraged to contribute to the funding of democracy. So it is important that there is that recognition that we don't have a huge pot of money, but for every program we fundraise. What's important for us is that when we fundraise, we become successful. And we are very grateful to the generosity of South Africans, starting with our members. Our leaders have also contributed quite generously. Corporate South Africa, as well as getting funding from government through the IEC. So our programs are running, and I really sometimes am not sure why this matter of whether the ANC is running programs from time to time surfaces as a media interest. But I guess it's because in the past we couldn't even pay our staff salaries, and we are very grateful that we've worked together to reduce overheads, to live within the resources that we do receive. Some we receive regularly, and also to depend on our own fundraising, including from our own members.
And then what of those who assume that with the party having dipped below 50% in the past election, that it would be slightly even more difficult to raise funds going forward? And this is, of course, against what the president said today, because he was quite upbeat. He was quoted as saying many people actually are willing to fund the ANC despite the poor showing.
We are really encouraged that despite the outcome of elections, there are a lot of concerns, and we've also been discussing, including with the private sector, with especially black middle strata, but middle class in general, black and white, to look at how the ANC can recover. Having said so, and that is why today's golf day was sold, and there was still demand, but we couldn't have more than what the loans of Rondebosch, I think, could take. So we are really, really, really humbled by the generosity and the interest to ensure that the ANC recovers and the ANC continues in its mission to save South Africa.
Now, Doctor, today you also addressed the Women's League Manyano, reminding them that the ANC was, of course, formed in the church and that you continue to draw your strength as a political party from the prayers of members of the church. But the relationship between the party and the church has gone through various phases, great ones, very difficult ones. And just last year, Archbishop Thabo Makgopa was very firm in his criticism of the ANC-led government in his Christmas Eve sermon, even warning that if there is no change on the part of the ANC, the party could could suffer even more significant losses in the local government elections. So the church has never shied away from being frank with the ANC around your party. Do you welcome this frankness from the church?
Certainly, we do welcome the frankness. The church has played a very critical role in the formation of the ANC as a vehicle to liberate those that were oppressed. And we appreciate the faith-based sector that is always on the side of the poor, the downtrodden, the marginalized, because that's what faith is all about, and that's what godliness is all about. The Anglican Church is my family church, and Archbishop Ramokgopa is my bishop, and I respect his message, which is shared so that we can all reflect. We're using his reflections as part and parcel of assessing what could have gone wrong and what should we do to strengthen the renewal agenda. Yes, we do take seriously what the faith-based sector says, what the traditional leaders who also birthed the ANC say, what the middle strata also say, and with all that input, work together to ensure that the poor, the marginalized, are actually at the center of what we do, what we refer to as the working class. And also the motive forces, those that must benefit from our struggle and our programs. This includes on a racial basis, the racial inequalities, the gender inequalities, issues of safety, and generally the sharing of the wealth of the country, and also a peaceful society, Africa and world. Bishop Ramokgopa also reflected on peace in our country and in the world. So we are taking his statement comprehensively as part of our reflections.
Now, as you mark this milestone of 113 years, you're heading into a year of difficult decisions as well around provinces that performed poorly in the elections. Some analysts actually have gone on to state that disbandment would further divide and ultimately weaken the party going into local government elections. Has such a view been considered that perhaps you might need to step back and rather support or reinforce these PECs as opposed to taking the decision of disbandment?
The ANC never disbands any structure easily and lightly. And when we have concluded the assessments and also the inputs of the NEC collective, we will communicate to the branches and to our structures as well as to the public what the final outcome would be and why we took whatever decision we would take. I would really request that we should not preempt the outcome because we never take any decision in terms of the future of a leadership collective lightly.
Fair enough.
We also, however, acknowledge that they've also done a lot of analysis and self-reflections. They've shared with us also what they wish or they contribute as part of recovery, and all that is taken into consideration.
Fair enough. Now, Gauteng, though, was your home province. You were deputy chairperson when Paul Mashatile was chair. It was a strong ANC that enjoyed great electoral support. How does it feel, though? Are you slightly disheartened that your home province is now among those that are being discussed when they talk about poor electoral performance today?
Most definitely. I think the decline started when we lost most of the metro areas, Gauteng being a largely metropolitan province. It had a very big knock at our capacity, and it also was an indication that a lot is wrong. We, however, have also begun recovery with a number of by-elections being won, and also, as we have seen, alignments in the metros to regain the leadership. Most, if not the majority of awards are led by African National Congress councillors, and we believe that it is important that we do not sulk and step back, but we need to learn take lessons from the performance and indeed forge ahead. The experience of Gauteng is a phenomenon that is happening even here in the Western Cape. Our performance was lower than we worked towards, but it's part and parcel of the reflection that I've talked about, and that we are seeing recovery. I think South Africans did not opt for any other party against the ANC, except the MKP phenomenon, which we are studying. So South Africans stayed home. They didn't go out and vote. And that is why even here in the Western Cape, as part of 113th anniversary activities, we are going door to door. We are meeting sectors, and we are also going through what we call the liberation heritage routes as part of the pilgrimage. And we want to emerge, and that will be clear in the statement the president will share, as a party that is going back to basics, back to the people.
Speaking of back to the people, I'm sure you've seen that tweet by Jordan Hill-Lewis, where he goes on to state that the ANC is disingenuous if they're going to say that that specific stadium, the Khayelitsha Stadium, was their stadium of choice. It actually was the last option. In fact, they had attempted to get others, but it was fully booked. Your take on just that statement?
It has no truth at all in it. And we don't understand why it should not be Khayelitsha. Khayelitsha has been a site of struggle for liberation, against colonialism, against apartheid, and we have invested hugely. For instance, I know when I was in health in government, that a state of the art, a green hospital was built in Khayelitsha. There are developments that have happened since, and I've personally been there, and the people of Khayelitsha have not as yet arrived at the better life that we all envisage. Why not them? The ANC has always been found amongst the people that are still have to benefit fully.
So if I'm hearing,
over and above what is done. So the statement that the other stadia were not available is devoid of any truth whatsoever.
But what I'm taking from your response there is also that you're confirming what the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, has stated, that Khayelitsha is in a state of neglect, according to you, that they have been neglected by the DA-led government? Is that what you have found on the ground?
I also went to Google it. The experience of both, it's like since the ANC was out of government, they were not prioritized between that period. It's as if, between the time you can see that hostels, for instance, in Google it, hostels were being rebuilt as part of Fusana Madoloba, the program that the ANC ran here. But then it's just like froze in the past. The graveyards are in a very bad state, and the sewer everywhere. But you can see that progress was there, but it seems to be frozen. We don't want to over-criticize. Where there has been progress, we have acknowledged that, including the state-of-the-art hospital that is there. But the progress has been extremely slow, and people feel despondent, even though these townships are still ANC stronghold. So we are going back to our people, going back to basics, and we call on ANC branches to reflect branch by branch on how we can advance the aspirations of the people and build on. Yes, people do get the grants. That's a national program. Yes, children are paid for, including NSFAS and all that. They acknowledge that, but they say that is supposed to be temporary relief. There's a need for jobs, there's a need for infrastructure, there's a need to change the pipes for soup and water, because those were meant for an informal community that is not meant to be closer to town and all that. So we need to be able to upgrade this infrastructure to accommodate the growing townships and all that. Yes, progress has been very slow. Yes, the people are despondent. And yes, one of the attributes is that the local government and the provincial government did not prioritize them enough. It's just like in Mitchell's Plain, in other areas, the other big problem is the levels of crime, where children are caught in between when gangsters are fighting and all that. And we don't say leave it only to the DA. And why we are in Khayelitsha, especially in Western Cape in particular, is to look at how we can work together, including within the GNU perspective, to give hope to all South Africans, especially those that have been left behind.
Fortunately, we'll be having the Democratic Alliance a bit later on the program to respond to some of these specific statements. But Dr., just in closing, former President Jacob Zuma, as you've seen, is still fighting to remain a member of the ANC. His foundation spokesperson last night speaking to my colleague, saying processes were not followed. The former president was denied the opportunity to present himself physically before the DC, so that in that instance one could express themselves fully and also show emotion. He says the processes were significantly flawed. Your views on this?
Because we may have to deal with this matter, including legally, I will not comment much, except to say that due process has been followed during the initial disciplinary action, and it is processed by a disciplinary committee, which is fully empowered, independent of the NEC, to follow due process. We have no reason to doubt that they didn't. And there was also an appeals process that his matter was subjected to. And where we are now, unless evidence is put before us, we have no reason that due process was not followed. It's always a pain to have one of your senior leaders expelled. However, if you look at it, he expelled himself even before. I think our constitution is very clear. You establish another party or you contest against the ANC, that is a disciplinary matter, and that unfortunately had to be undertaken. And yes, unfortunately, he himself decided to have a party outside the African National Congress. But he's a South African. We invited MK Party as well in the GNU perspective, and we call on all leaders to focus on serving South Africa and South Africans.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much for your time this evening. It seems the light there has gone off, but thank you very much nevertheless for indulging us and staying on for quite longer. That's ANC Treasurer General Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa speaking to us. All right, let's quickly take a short break. After that, we continue with our interviews. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us on Face the Nation. So the question we're asking tonight is, what do you think should be Ndlozi's next move following his resignation from the party? A number of you have already commented. Let's look at some of those comments on social media. All right, Pule M says Dr. Ndlozi has got a future in SA politics, and I doubt he will join the MK party as many people think. Instead, I think he might join the Patriotic Alliance or SACP. Remember, the SACP are going to contest local government elections. I suppose the LE means that, as a political party, according to Mr. Mapaila. Wandile says Malema is the cause of the problem. He must adopt wait and see attitude, but I can smell something that he might rejoin the ANC because other parties will clash with him ideologically, and it's a great loss to EFF. We will miss his humble jokes in Parliament. Were the jokes always humble though? Melikaya says, my suspicion is him being a lecturer for 5 years away from the current stressful and toxic political environment. Dr. Kanga says, constructive dismissal this one. My view is that he should take a break from politics and join academia. As would have been expected from a doctor, that he would advise that you go into academia. Well, Dr. Ndlozi is no longer a member of Parliament. The EFF has confirmed his resignation from the House, along with Yazini Tetyana, who served in the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature. The EFF says in a statement that Ndlozi, however, remains a party member. His resignation from Parliament follows months of speculation about a fallout between him and EFF leader Julius Malema. Political analysts Sasanda Mwasheng and Bongani Mahlangu join me via video link to discuss this further. Good evening to the both of you. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. Well, many say this was the next logical step. They didn't see things unfolding any other way. Let's start with your reaction, Asanda. What do you make of this resignation by Ndlozi?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think it doesn't come as a surprise at all. It's to be expected considering the utterances by Julius Malema around the time of the elective conference. I mean, there's no way that as a senior political party member, you're going to take that kind of being directly insulted, but also being essentially left out of leadership deliberately, because that's what it's kind of amounted to. And so I'm not surprised that he has left at least Parliament for now, but I see it as half a resignation. I think part two is still coming, where he's going to resign from the political party known as the EFF soon.
Bongani, your views? Were you in the least bit surprised by this move?
No, greetings to you and the fellow panelists. No, I was not surprised at all. I mean, we just have to look at the timeline. So Ndlozi's wife at some point, I think around August, was attacked by the Supreme Leader of the EFF. There was a time when the Supreme Leader of the EFF was moving around the country and referred to Ndlozi as the good singer, and referred to him as a problematic individual. Obviously not using my words, went on to cite the speech that was made by Chairman Mao Zedong of China with regards to combating liberalism, and said that to let things slide for the sake of peace and friendship is problematic. He even went on to say that Ndlozi, whether him directly or through his people, that Ndlozi knew that Floyd was leaving but did not inform the organization of such. So if you look at those timeline of events, then you could have then predicted that this day will come. I mean, he was even barred from attending in December. So I think, as Asanda would have said, the next step is for him to get booted out of the organization. Even this resignation, I doubt it was voluntary. I think he was pushed out because it's part of him being processed out of the organization.
Now, Bongani, your use of the term supreme leader is not lost on us. We all know that this is a term that is mostly used for authority that is unchallenged, autocrats, dictators. So is that the view you hold about Julius Malema?
Definitely. And also, I come with this title for him when you look at the sequence of events in the EFF. I'll start with what Floyd had said. Floyd says in the first briefing of the MK that he was part of, where he was announced, that not even once does the individual suggest that you are betraying the organization. The individual says that you are betraying me. And if you look at the organization in itself, even the media and everybody else struggles to define the organization as an entity in itself and the leader as an entity in itself. They usually interchanges. Why? Because the leader can come onto a platform and pronounce on something, let's say the foreign immigration and so forth, something that would not have been processed internally by the organization. The leader can come onto a platform and say an individual is suspended or expelled, something that has not been processed internally in the organization. So the leader is the organization and the organization is him. Even the people that he had preferred to emerge in their last conference in Nazareth emerged in the very same sequence for the exact positions and so forth and so on. So clearly,
but we don't know what was his preference, do we?
Remember, there were media speculations about his preference. There was an individual whose name I would have forgotten, the individual that went on Twitter or X to say that we do not agree with you, Supreme Leader. And I think the very same night or the next day, the individual was processed out of the organization.
But that was
He's
in
a young leader, I think, from Limpopo.
No, but that was in relation to the name of Ndlozi. But for us, at least, one would assume would be quite reckless if we are to endorse or state, as you state, that there was a leadership that was preferred by him because there was no slate. Contrary to what maybe we've seen with other political parties, there were no slates that were bandied about.
That's the thing. So in the media, there was a slate that was published, and the leaders of the organization said that they know nothing of it. But interestingly enough, when they go to conference, those names then find expression. So that's why I also make reference to the young man from Limpopo. I think was in the student command. I think his contest was solely about the deputy president and Ndlozi's name and the rejection of Guthrie card. He was processed, I think, the same night, if not the same day. So there were bits and pieces. And when we also spoke with leaders in other provinces, or I spoke with leaders of other provinces, some said to me, you know, as so much as we would prefer Ndlozi as a DP, but there is a mandate. So just because maybe there was no paper that was leaked to media and so forth as what is done, because usually it's the ANC that is used as a benchmark and standard. So when you have not done what the ANC does with regards to faction slates and so forth, it is said those things don't exist. Like when I heard one speaker say that there is no faction in the EFF. In the EFF, there is a faction, and that is the faction led by the Supreme Leader. Whoever stands in opposition of that faction will either not lead within either parliament or any deployment or within the organization, or will get expelled. And we have seen that happen multiple times. You can look at Raymond Mpuletsang in the Northwest. You can look at Ugoba, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the people that stood in opposition of the Supreme Leader, stood in opposition of the faction that dominates that one faction, and they're no longer leaders or members of the EFF today.
Okay, let's rope in Sanda. Sanda, now we've all observed that when people are at odds, they just focus on their fight. There's very little appreciation or consideration of the consequences further on post that conflict. Will Mbuyiseni's departure have a significant consequence for the party, according to you?
Well, I think it's going to have quite a big impact, because he was one of the people who was involved in the policy making of the EFF together with Floyd Shibambu, and he was also involved in basically organizing and particularly building some of the student structures. You know, if you think about Floyd, who was a student leader, and Ndlozi was a workers' union member at an academic institution, and one of his contributions to the EFF was to make them relevant during the time of his must fall, using, you know, his movement building, which he had done when he was in the academic space to fight for insourcing of workers in the academic space. And so this is somebody who has had some input on policy making. If you look at even in Parliament, he was in the Rules Committee for quite a long time. And this is the place where new rules had to be made after the EFF challenged the ways in which the ANC was running Parliament and the ways in which rules were implemented, which was one of the things that they used to differentiate themselves from the ANC and other political parties. And in a lot of ways, one can argue that they used the anti-intellectual sentiment of the Zuma era and the kicking out of a lot of policymakers in the ANC. They used that intellectual gap and that policy gap in order to entrench themselves and to entrench their ideologies, which did take root with the people, particularly young students, but also with workers, in ensuring that they were seen and known as the ones who were fighting against institutionalized racism in South Africa, whether it showed itself up in schools or in universities or even in other workplaces. So he's a member that was, you know, a member of good and important standing, having been a member of Parliament for 10 years, and having contributed in terms of policy, and also having challenged, you know, issues like Phala, having challenged on issues like the spending of money on new age advertising during state capture and various other issues which were important to crafting the EFF's identity and separating the EFF from other political parties. And so I think it's lost part of its identity, at least in Parliament. And when he resigns, it will lose a big part of its identity as a political party and a big part of its ideology. Of course, the Supreme Leader, I like that, is going to deny all of this and pretend as if nothing has happened. But you've got 2, 3, 4 members who have institutional knowledge and deep roots within the party and deep movement building skills who are gone, and that is going to have consequences. And also I want to add to some of the events that were articulated by Bongani, the fact that Julius Malema kicked out somebody who was one of the biggest movement makers, organizers in KZN because he couldn't fill up buses, and there were various others who are important to the organization in the various provinces. So you've got a KZN that was lost recently. You've got an Eastern Cape that has been lost, at least in Parliament. A strong member of the Eastern Cape who has been lost now in Parliament. And you've got 2 important organizers and policymakers who are gone. And so it's going to be difficult for the political party to come back because they have to rebrand, they have to re-engage their personality beyond Julius Malema, and they're going to have to re-engage with their ideology.
But what of some analysts that say, at a time of great betrayal, if we can label it as that, what happened with Floyd Shibambu being the first to leave the EFF, they would say that trust would be placed above all else, that even if leaders were competent, but when choosing even a group of leaders to lead with, the criteria would be that trust must be placed at the top. Your views on that?
Well, I think when I think about the Tea Parties, that Julius Malema was very happy to be posing with his own leadership in Nkandla. It was written, as far back as then that something was cooking. And, I don't understand why Julius Malema would have thought that it was beneath, Jacob Zuma to poach his best staff. We must remember that Julius Malema himself is a product of Jacob Zuma, was groomed by Jacob Zuma, and his most important role during Jacob Zuma's tenure was to heckle, was to insult, and was to denigrate the former president of the ANC, Thabo Mbeki. And he was very successful in that mission. And as soon as he was done with his mission, he was kicked out of the ANC for various reasons that others have been retained in the ANC for. And then when he formed his own political party, he started to call for Jacob Zuma to fall, and he did give Zuma a hard time. And so I was quite surprised when he turned around and was suddenly friends with Jacob Zuma and attending tea parties. And I'm not surprised that, Zuma came back and did the ultimate betrayal, taking not only comrades but friends from him, because I don't think that they're going to be able to engage each other in the way that, for instance, Mbalula and Julius Malema seem to be able to engage each other as friends of some kind. I think this one is all open war, and it's going to take some time for the scars and the trauma, I think, on all of their sides to be able to be dealt with and engaged with. But unfortunately, all of this is happening in the public, and it does not look good for Julius Malema, particularly because of the utterances that he keeps making when he should be engaging with his hurt and his upset in a mature way, because this is the time when EFF members need mature leadership. This is the time that they need affirmation that he is not the dictator that everybody is calling him to be, but that he is rather a leader who can hear and listen to other people's opinions. Because right now the question is, if he can treat his most trusted comrades in this way during this fallout, what is he going to do to the next person who he so much as believes might possibly be trying to plot something against him? I think he's becoming a very paranoid leader at a time when he should be, showing confidence, maturity, and calm, because this is a very unstable time. The EFF may be able to move through it, but it doesn't make it any less, unstable or any less threatening to the political party.
Bongani, now speculation is rife that Ndlozi may join the MK party. Do you see this happening?
Well, in the short run, I do not foresee it happening. In fact, even before I attempt to respond to that, Ndlozi has been very quiet with regards to what's happening. And I don't think him being quiet is any political, strategic or tactical move. I think it's just a coward. He does come from an activist background at Wits. He does come from an academic background and so forth. So he's not really someone that is known for political maneuvering or strategizing. So for him to then move all of a sudden to MK, I do not think that he has that in him for now. So I think what he would do is probably he would go into the shadows, allow the media and everyone else to move on and forget about him while he processes and plots his next move. And for him to join even an MK or any other organization, it would require serious lobbying for those people in that organization to recruit him into that structure. So he's still lingering. He still has this thing that I'm a member of the EFF, and obviously there are some people that are engaging him that do not leave. But him staying as well is not adding any value because, as I said, he's being processed out. Mm-hmm. And equally, even though this was not asked to me, I do believe that there will be some impact, especially in Gauteng in the next year. Because, I mean, if you look at Ndlozi, it does appeal to the black middle class, the black academic class, and that class is highly concentrated in a province such as Gauteng and in the metros in particular. And if you look at the EFF and how they performed there, in 2021, you would know that in Swan in Johannesburg, they actually dropped. They only increased in Eguruleni. That's after the ANC dropped by 10% there. So now, and also he was pitted to be premier should the EFF have won in Gauteng. That's because of his appeal in the province. Mm-hmm. So now him not being there, you'll find then that demographic group, that electoral demographic group will find itself being disgruntled. So then the EFF will seriously then have issues in the next year trying to find someone that will appeal there, because Dunga certainly doesn't appeal in Gauteng. So back to the question, in the short run, I do not foresee him joining the MK, maybe in the long run.
Now, Bongani, I want us to shift gears a bit and focus on the ANC. Now, it's 2 days away from the January 8th celebrations. This year, of course, the celebrations are taking place against the backdrop of a weakened ANC entering into that co-governing arrangement under the GNU. I was just speaking to Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa, and I asked her the question of those who fear that the ANC might deviate from its core principles beyond this point to almost appease members of the GNU. Your take on just the statement by some who fear that post this January 8th statement, this will be something that becomes the norm of them deviating from their core principles?
Those people first have to identify what are the core principles of the ANC and where are the deviation points. Because if you look at it right now, the Bella bill, for instance, somehow they maneuvered and it was signed and it's going to be implemented as is. Because the only thing that the minister will develop is regulations, which are the step-by-step with regards to implementation. The NHI, it's there. The EPWP that the DA wanted to be reviewed has not been reviewed as yet. In fact, what has been done is that it's the culling of the CWP, the community work programs, removing those that are 55 and above. And that was a position of the ANC even before this GNU, even before elections. If you look at what the ministers, especially DA ministers, are doing, let's say Home Affairs with regards to the visa issue, you'll have to go back to Operation Vulindlela Phase 1. It's exactly what the ANC was planning to do or would have done, whether there was a GNU or not. So as we speak, materially, there has really been nothing that says that the ANC has deviated from anything. If you look at the medium-term development plan and the 3 priorities there, they are cut and paste from the ANC manifesto. And that has been the ANC position for some time. So there's no new or material or significant issue that has been added so far. So as far as the DA and other members, in fact, of the GNU, because it's not just the DA, as far as them trying to steer the ship in a certain direction, that has not happened up until this point. Yes, we may not know what will happen in the future,
so
but I doubt even this January 8th statement will cause any ship to change direction or course.
So I suppose then they have to guard, as other members of the GNU, guard against being cannibalized by the ANC if you continue to say that the policies they're implementing currently are those of the African National Congress. To the both of you, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. That was political analyst Asanda Mwasheng and Bongani Mahlangu speaking to us on Ndlozi's resignation as well as the ANC's January 8th celebrations. To the story now, the Democratic Alliance has dismissed allegations by ActionSA that leader and Minister of Agriculture John Steenhuisen uses luxury blue light cars. ActionSA accused Steenhuisen of enjoying the perks of multiple luxury vehicles, including an Audi Q7, BMW X5 and Toyota Prado, each fitted with blue lights and signalling systems, which contradicts DA Federal Council Chairperson Helen Zilla's claims that no DA minister uses blue lights. DA spokesperson Willie Okamp joins me now via Teams to just give us clarity on this particular story. Good evening, Willie. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. Now, your party leader has dismissed the allegations, suggesting that the DA or the DA ministers are now enjoying the perks of being in government following that statement by ActionSA. John Steenhuisen has actually spoken. There's even a video that I've seen being circulated where he says that was just an attempt to manufacture some sort of a scandal, but it went wrong. There is no scandal. Just share the facts about these vehicles.
Good evening and thank you for having me. The facts are simple. The Minister of Agriculture and all other DA ministers inherited the vehicles that they got when they became ministers. No one of our ministers insisted on having a new vehicle. When ActionSA drafted their press statement, they said and they spoke about R1 million vehicles that the Minister of Agriculture has got. And that simply is not true. In Cape Town, John Steenhuisen has an Audi Q7, which is 6 years old and has got 135,000 kilometers on the clock. He inherited that vehicle from the previous Minister of Agriculture, Toko Didiza. In Tshwane, in Pretoria, he did not have a vehicle because of the split in the Department of Agriculture and Land Reform. So the department wanted to buy a new vehicle for him. And he said, no, I'm not going to take a new vehicle. Show me the list of the vehicles that we currently have on our books. And one of those vehicles was a 7-year-old Toyota Prado with 239,000 kilometers on the clock. And Minister Steenhuisen said, that car will suffice, bring it, I'll use that car. What also is very important is to note that although those cars were inherited, and although they have got blue light systems in them, the DA ministers made it very clear that they will not be using those blue lights. They gave instructions that those blue lights in their vehicles must not be used. So for ActionSA to now come and to say that we are using these blue light systems and we've got R1 million cars is simply just not true. And we do not have time for cheap playground politicking on this. We need to get to the business of what is really important in South Africa. And if ActionSA want to be a constructive opposition, as they said that they would be, we would urge them not to try and play small-time politicking, but rather come and be a proper opposition party that can be constructive.
Willie, just for clarity, on the blue lights conversation, so what you're saying is that the system is still fitted, but DA members are not allowed to utilize those blue lights. In essence, they must be stuck in traffic like the rest of the citizens in South Africa. They will not have their blue lights on and have everybody move out of the way for them. They must wake up early. Was that the purpose?
Absolutely. There's absolutely no reason why a minister from any party has got a right of way above any other citizen. Ministers must plan their trips. They must start early with their trips so that they don't have to push away traffic. There has never been one single DA minister that utilized the blue lights in his vehicle. It will not happen, and we made it clear that it must not happen. No minister has got a bigger right to use the road than any other normal citizen. So whenever you drive and you see a blue light convoy pushing you off the road, you can be certain that that is most definitely not a DA minister in that vehicle.
All right, just in closing, I want us to touch on the statement by the Deputy President on the neglect of the people of Khayelitsha. We also just spoke to the ANC's Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa, who says she as well can attest to the fact that the people of Khayelitsha have been somewhat left behind. She has commended certain programs, among them being the state-of-the-art hospital, but said to a great extent, though, the pace of ensuring that they also are part of those that enjoy this democracy through the services that they are offered has been quite slow. Your take on this?
Well, Cape Town spends more on infrastructure, directly benefiting lower income households than the entire capital budgets of other cities. In the 24-25 year, Cape Town is making South Africa's largest ever infrastructure investment by a metropolitan city with a 75% pro-poor spend, directly benefiting lower income households. In Cape Town, just to give you a bit of the stats, and this is not DA stats, this is the Stats SA stats. 99.8% of people living in the Cape Town metro has got access to piped or tapped water. 95.6% of people in Cape Town has got access to improved sanitation. And 95.4% of people in the Western Cape has the highest number of households with flush toilets. So if you look at the stats,
Really,
the
unfortunately,
DA is doing far more.
Really, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I've gotten the gist of just your response that, in fact, the people of Khayelitsha have not been left behind, and if anything, the Western Cape government has a more pro-poor budget. Most of their budget is actually being used on...